Hello, you're listening to Mike Madden on the Art Show podcast. Here you'll find interviews with authors, musicians, artists and anyone else in and around the arts. Some of the interviews are taken direct from the Art Show on Expat Radio, with one or two specials in between. This show features author Lorna Cook talking about her debut novel, The Forgotten Village. It was originally broadcast on Expat Radio on Monday the 25th of March 2019. Due to licensing restrictions, we were unable to play the songs from the original broadcast. Hello, this is Mike Madden on the Art Show on Expat Radio, and today my special guest is Lorna Cook. Hello, Lorna.
Hi.
Today Lorna is here to talk about her debut novel, The Forgotten Village, which is a great achievement for any author, but particularly for Lorna, who has managed to weave a story between two completely different periods of time. So just tell our listeners a little bit about the novel.
Okay. So it's set in World War II and in the present day. So part of the novel weaves into the next part, and it goes back and forth. And it's set in the abandoned coastal village of Tyneham in Dorset, which was a real-life requisition village where in the middle of World War II, over 200 villagers, well, all the villagers were forced to leave their homes. They had under a month to pack up and go in the Christmas of 1943. And the story follows Melissa in the present day as she discovers a photograph of a woman taken around the time of the requisition, and something doesn't sit right with her about the photograph. And so she goes on a bit of a mission to discover what happened to her and what happened in the great house of the village on the final hours of requisition.
And Tyneham's actually a real village, described as a ghost village. Yeah. And I know that the whole idea for basing this in Tyneham was all came from a Facebook post.
It did, yeah. Madly enough. God bless social media.
Yes, it's responsible for a lot of things, isn't it? Yeah. But I also know that it wasn't quite enough for you to just sort of research Tyneham, and you actually managed to get a family holiday there.
Yes, I pretended it was a family holiday, but actually it was a research trip, as most of these things are. I've discovered it. Well, my husband discovered it on a Facebook post. And he tagged me in it, and I think it was a newspaper article. It was a national newspaper article, and it was just a sort of a general human interest piece about the village. And I think some tourist had been down there and taken loads of pictures, and this national newspaper picked up on it and said, hey, look at this, it's quite interesting. And I clicked on it, and it was interesting, and I'd never heard of it before. And I was quite surprised that I hadn't heard of it. And I was even more surprised that it's not the only one that was taken in the war. There were quite a few villages that got taken around Britain, where the residents were forced out, and none of them were ever allowed back in any of them. So it was quite intriguing to me, and I did sort of end up going down there to have a good look around. And how you picture something and how you start writing a book about it are very different to when you eventually get down there and get to have a look around, and everything looks completely different to what you thought it was going to look like.
And you couldn't go into the village straight away. You had to wait for permission. Is that right? So
they open it. It's owned by the Ministry of Defence, and they still use the land around the village for tank training. It's part of the Lulworth Ranges, and in the hills above it, they still do fire from tanks. And so the village was just positioned at the bottom of this lovely little valley, straight down into this place called Warbarrow Bay, which is this beautiful little beach. But this village was very alone in that area, and they needed to take it. And so, I discovered it, went down and had to wait for the only day in the Easter holidays when the MOD allow tourists in. They allow them in sporadically. I think a lot of the summer holidays maybe it's open, but they change it quite frequently. A few Sundays, a few Saturdays throughout the year, that kind of thing. So I had to time it quite correctly.
It's a genuine piece of history that you managed to weave into your story. So you've got a heroine in the present day, and she goes back to the time of World War II, if you like, in terms of discovering her past. So how do you keep it all real from that point of view? I guess it's the authenticity of it all.
Yeah. So in the present day, Melissa, she stays firmly in the present day. She doesn't go time traveling.
Just to clarify.
Just thought I'd better clear that up. but no, she has a lot of resources at her fingertips, but it's, weaving them in slowly, and, making sure that it's believable. And this is one of the problems I had, was the believability. So I had the plot in my head about what happened in the Great House, between the three people who were left, hours before requisition. And for reasons of believability, I think it's very hard sometimes, because I read a lot of books like this where, bits set in the past, bits set in the present. And you kind of sometimes have to suspend belief a little bit. And I had this plot in my head, which I won't spoil for you. And I didn't write the book for ages, because I thought I need a location for various reasons that no one has set foot in for nigh on 75 years. And it's harder to find a location like that in everyday life than you might think. And so my sort of believability chart was at an all-time high. And I thought, I'm not sure about this. And then when I discovered the Facebook post and I discovered Tyneham, the two things just slotted really closely together. Although Tyneham has been opened for quite some time, for the purposes of my plot, I made it so that it wasn't.
Now, the book's also out in Germany and the Netherlands, and also in the US and Canada under the title of The Forgotten Wife.
Yeah.
So how do you think they'll take this in Germany and the Netherlands? Because we're used to these villages. I'm all right, we're not all used to ghost villages, but we're kind of used to that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, this was my first question. So my first deal was in Germany before I got Britain, which was strange. And when my agent phoned me to tell me, I was so thrown by this. It's like, okay, I do have a very obvious and funny question, which is, this is a book set in World War II. Why? Just want to buy it. Because I wasn't really sure that this would be right up their street, but apparently is. And they love that sort of home front aspect of it, apparently. So it's not about the fighting, and it's not about the atrocities. It's very much a human interest story set in a little village out in the middle of nowhere in a beautiful part of the world. And that seems to be something that translates quite well.
Now, you're based in Essex, so was Dorset familiar to you before you discovered Tyneham?
No, I had been through it, and I think I'd been there a couple of times as a child, but I hadn't really done much in the way of holidaying there. And so it was really lovely to find this location and to be able to actually plan a lovely family break around it. And I fell in love immediately. It was beautiful, beautiful part of the world.
Yeah, it is a very nice part of the world, Dorset. Now, the book's out on, I think, is it April the 4th is the release date?
Yeah, April the 4th, yeah.
But it's been out to a few people already, and with pre-orders, it's already reached the top 100 in at least one category. So, with this being your first book, will you be avidly checking the rankings and the reviews?
Yes, I'm doing it every single day.
Brilliant.
I think we all do. I think debut novelists all do, and anyone who says they don't, I think they're fibbing.
We've spoken to quite a few who've had more than one book out, and they all read the reviews and check the rankings regularly as well.
Yeah, they say don't check the reviews, but you just can't help yourself. It's just a habit now.
Well, of course, you're going to have to check more than just the Amazon.co.uk reviews, because it'll be .de and all kinds of things as well. Yeah,
that's another thing to add to the list of everything to do every day.
So, obviously, it's only sort of a couple of weeks away until your launch. Have you decided what you're going to do on your launch day yet?
No, not really. I think everybody sort of posts pictures on social media about what they're doing on their launch days, and some people are doing very exciting things, going out for lunch, opening bottles of champagne. And I saw another of the Avon authors. I'm published by Avon, another Avon author, Claire Allen, sort of, this is my launch day, I'm doing the school run. And I thought, yeah, that's probably what I'll end up doing. So, I'm just going to take it very, very breezily. I'm probably going to carry on writing my next book. I'm going to sit down and carry on writing my next book. That will take my mind off constantly refreshing all the Amazon pages.
And is that your second book that you'll be writing?
Yes, yeah.
So, and I believe that you've already got plans for that to be published this time next year.
Yes, I think it's coming out in February, so not a million miles away, actually.
And is that another sort of dual time novel?
Yeah, it is. It's going to be set in Scotland, so it's kind of set in the Scottish Highlands at the start of the Second World War, and then present day as well.
Right. So this is it's kind of a trend with you that you quite like these split timelines.
Yeah, well, they're kind of my favourite genre to read. And so I think it's probably been a long time coming that I wrote a book like this. I think I never did before because it was far easier to read somebody else's lovely book than it was to sit down and write your own. But no, I think I might have found my niche, hopefully.
And it always intrigues me that you're essentially writing two stories, one in the present and one in the past.
Yeah.
So do you actually write it like that, or do you sort of do it bit by bit and interweave them as you go?
No, so how you read the book is how I write the book. So I stop after, I'm not sure, 2 or 3 chapters in one time period. And I kind of leave each section on a bit of a cliffhanger, I guess, or leave the reader with a question in mind, and then flip back to the next time period. And I stop at a point that feels good to me and then carry on. So it's kind of woven in just as I write it.
As we said earlier, you're based in Essex by the sea,
Mm,
and we're going to take a break now with Jan and Dean and Surf City.
okay.
You're listening to Expat Radio, beaming out across France and around the world.
Hello, this is Mike Madden on the Art Show on Expat Radio, and we've just been talking to my special guest today, Lorna Cook, about her latest novel, her debut novel, The Forgotten Village. So hello again, Lorna.
Hiya.
Now, in a previous life, you were a journalist, and there's a quote from you that says you left the dark side to write dual-time novels. Why would you refer to journalism as the dark side, and what made you take the step into the full-time writing?
So I was a journalist, and then I became a PR, and that's the bit I refer to as the dark side. But actually, I loved all of it, and I fell into each one sort of accidentally. I think I read a study in a women's magazine that said most people go through 3 careers in their life. So this would be my third. So fingers crossed it kind of carries on from this point here and I don't flick into something else. But I was a journalist, and I left university at 21, went onto a graduate trainee scheme for Euro Money, which was part of the Daily Mail group. I think still is. And then I went freelance and ended up writing press releases for some of the companies I'd been writing about in the trade magazines. And then some of them requested that I start, instead of just writing their press releases, start sending their press releases out. But of course, that's not journalism or writing anymore. That's kind of PR. So that's how I ended up falling into that. And then I had a natural break when I had my children. I've got 2 little girls. And it was only after I was juggling sort of all of that with having 2 children. It wasn't so bad with the first one, but with the second one, 2 children plus, 2 jobs, journalism and PR, does get a bit too much. So then accidentally, I ended up writing a book very slowly, bit by bit, while my second child slept, and while I took a sort of forced-ish maternity leave, where I decided I wasn't going to work so hard and I was going to try and just take some time off to be with my little girl. And then I started writing a book, so that didn't really go according to plan.
It's a brave move to start writing a book while your child sleeps, because I know lots of people just take the opportunity to sleep themselves while the child's sleeping.
Yeah, that is true. I probably should have done that. Slightly less mad move.
So you started on your first novel, and the first novel is not the one that's being published. I think you've still got that.
Yeah, that's languishing in the proverbial drawer, as they say. It's just on my hard drive, and it will stay there forever, I think. No, I just started writing a book. It was a very pure romance book that was not fantastic, will never see the light of day, but I think it proved to me that I could finish a book, which is a really hard thing to do. I think anybody who writes a book and manages to finish a book, regardless of whether you're looking for a publishing deal or other, I think that you deserve a huge pat on the back for that, because it's not an easy thing to do. So I did eventually finish the book, and then by this point I already had the story in my head for The Forgotten Village, but I forced myself not to start writing that until I had finished the first one.
It's an interesting one, because I think you're absolutely right that to actually write to the end on a novel is a great achievement, whether you intend to get it out there or not. And there's a lot of ways you can get to that point. Did you do any sort of writing courses or retreats or anything like that?
No, I didn't. I know a lot of friends who've done creative writing MAs, and I've not heard anyone say anything bad about it. So I think from that point of view, a lot of people recommend creative writing MAs. I didn't do one. I didn't even occur to me to do one, to be honest. It might be something I go and do another year. But I had come from a writing background in journalism, so I felt like I had a little knowledge about what I was going to, how I was going to structure things. And I'm an avid reader, so I read a lot around the genre in which I write. So I worked out-ish how to structure a dual timeline novel. And then, of course, you can always fall back on your editor and they can tell you you've done a little bit here, a little bit wonky, and they help a lot. But I joined the Romantic Novelists Association, which is fantastic. And if you write romance and you're published, you can join immediately. And if you are unpublished and you want help and assistance and guidance into how to get published, then you can join every January. They open it up and it's called the New Writers Scheme. So I joined that, I think in 2017. In January, and what happens is you get guidance and loads of support. You get to make great buddies both online and in local chapter groups all around the UK and Ireland. I think now I've got one too, and Scotland, and I'm not sure if there's any overseas branches. There probably should be, because I know a few overseas writers that have joined. But as part of the New Writers Scheme, they will assign you a published novelist who remains anonymous for the most part and who will critique your entire book for you. And it's so inexpensive compared to, I think it's £100 and something, but don't quote me. And that is incredibly inexpensive compared to what it would cost to hire somebody to manuscript critique your work for you. I think it can cost upwards of about £400. So it's a real saving, and it comes with such benefits, making buddies and going to conferences and events and that kind of thing. And that is, I'm going to owe most of me getting published to that. I'm going to owe the vast majority of it to that, because I had such valuable criticisms and positive responses from the report that it really spurs you on and helps you correct things you've done wrong. And that was very, very valuable to me. And it's condensed as well. It's, it happens all in the space of that 1 year, from joining to getting your report back. So it's invaluable. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever had anybody refer to that on the show. So that's really, really good advice for anybody out there. We should have to wait till next January, but yeah, I think you're right. It can cost £400 or a lot more to get a good manuscript critique.
It can, and the good thing is about the scheme is that they pair you up with somebody who writes in your genre or vaguely in your genre, if not. So the novelist who critiqued mine, Alison May, I think she is available for hire. Just going to plug her there. She was wonderful. And she doesn't write dual timeline novels, but she writes what they call commercial women's fiction, which is a phrase I'd never heard until I became a published novelist. But she writes in that genre, so she was perfectly placed to be able to say, this is what will work in the genre which you're writing. This bit here doesn't work so much. And it's great. So if you write Mills and Boon, they'll pair you up with a Mills and Boon writer. And the same for sort of different elements of the romance genre.
I think, it's a very important point about genre that we've had a few people on who've kind of said, you might think your book's great, but if it doesn't fit into a specific genre, then a publisher is not really going to touch it, because they need to be able to sell that book to the great British public.
That's true. I saw this great, I think it was a tweet from Johnny Geller, who's a really top agent in Britain. And he said, I'm going to paraphrase, I'm not going to get it right, but it was quite eye-opening. He said, you need your book to be so different that nobody's had anything like it before, but you also need it to be so similar that people know where to position it. It was something like that.
Yeah, that's it's a tricky one, that really, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
So you finished your book, you wrote the end on it, and what was the journey like after that? Did you go through the agent route?
I did go through the agent route. I wasn't sure, to be honest, I wasn't sure if I was ever going to get it published or if I was even thinking about properly getting it published. But as part of the Romantic Novelists Association, you can go to their conferences every year, which are fantastic. And you go to sit in loads of lectures and loads of talks, and you learn so many different things about different elements. And one of the things they let you do for no extra money, can you believe it, is to have meetings with agents and publishers. And because it was free, part of the conference package, I thought, oh, why not? Go on, let's do it. And so you just send them something like one chapter, I think it is. They just read your first chapter and they give you some feedback on it. And it was because I met two absolutely lovely agents who both really gave me such positive feedback on it. After that, I was a bit spurred on. And so I did then, after a very long-winded route, I did eventually end up with my lovely agent, who's called Becky Ritchie at AM Heath. And she represents a few authors in the genre in which I write. So I knew she was perfectly placed. So yes, I did end up going down the agent route, which surprised me.
I think it's not unusual that people do that, and I think it's when you're with Avon, you get a huge support network from Avon, but before you get that far, you get a huge amount of support from your agent. So how long did it take from signing with the agent to actually getting Avon interested in it?
That's a very good question. I signed with Becky in the February of last year, and I think in April or May, I think it was, we had signed with Avon, and I think we just had a few edits. So you're right, you do get a load of support from your agent, or rather I got a lot of support. I was very lucky. So because I'd already been through the new writer's scheme, my manuscript was, I think, fairly all right. I'd already had some really good help and some feedback, so I'd polished that up. And then by the time Becky, my agent, looked at it, I felt it was all right, but there's always more you can do. I think you can tinker with a book to the ends of the earth, or you can just keep going with it, so you have to find a good time to stop. But Becky was great. She said, change this, change that. I like this. Can you add a few more scenes just to maybe flesh out your character a bit more, maybe give us some insight into her background, things like that. And so, yeah, with that support, I think that was in between the February and the April. And then I think it was about April or Mayish, I think we got Avon. So, yeah, it was quite fast, I think.
It does sound very quick, actually. We've had authors on who it's taken years from agent to book deal. So, as I say, Avon is a huge machine in publishing, and they will guide you all the way, advise you, edit you, and all that kind of thing. Were there any parts of that you didn't really enjoy? You thought, I've written my book, why doesn't it just happen now?
What didn't I enjoy? So structural edits, they were an eye opener. I think they were where you kind of have to not rewrite, but you have to. I was asked to fill in a lot more about my character, I think. And so a lot of scenes, and to tie up the two elements of the story together, I had to create a bit better, maybe a bit more of a backstory. And so it's that sort of thing. And I think by this time you've read your book. Well, I read my own book, oh gosh, so many times. I thought, oh no, I've got to rewrite bits of it. And I don't even want to read it again, let alone rewrite bits of it. So that was probably the bit that I didn't enjoy as much, but you have to do it and it helps the book and you want to help your own book out. So yeah, you do it. Copy edits and line edits, these are all things I didn't know because I come from a journalism background. And so I was very used to writing an article and then sending the article across to the sub-editor's desk. The sub-editors tweak it and then it disappears and it gets printed and it goes in a magazine. And so I was quite shocked, but surely sub-editors do this. So that was interesting. That was a learning curve, but it's your work. So you want to have control over it, or as much as you can, you want to be able to put in the words that you want to put in. So it makes perfect sense that the book comes back to you to edit yourself. It makes perfect sense. But at the time I was like, really? It's coming back my way?
Now, changing tack a little bit now, you've got some very useful posts on your website, and I particularly enjoyed the one about the beta readers and, your sort of introduction to beta readers and realizing that actually a beta reader, it's their job to hate your book and tell you what's wrong with it.
Yeah, definitely. I think so. That was the first blog post I wrote, and I was just having a little play around to see, what I could write about. And I went to a social media course, and this lovely lady on the social media course gave us some tasks and said, what should you write about? So I said this one, because I've just put my book through. At the time, my mum had just read my book. Oh, it's lovely. It's absolutely perfect. I wouldn't change anything. And you just know, that's not helpful, but thank you. But it's not helpful. And I know you're fibbing to save face. And so I had a few fantastic beta readers as part of my writing group. And they're brilliant. They're like, this bit doesn't work. I don't like this, and here's what I think you could change. And you think, thank you. That's exactly what I really needed. And it was really helpful. And it is their job to dislike parts of your book, because you want people who read your book before it gets published to tell you what's wrong with it. It's no good afterwards someone going, oh, I wish you'd change this bit. You think, no, it's no good now, it's published. So yeah, they are very useful, and it is their job to hate your book. It's true.
Yeah, it's a very valid point, because we all like praise, but we also all need criticism. So
definitely.
Now, I've also looked through your spying on you here, really, through Twitter, and I know you're very active in social media now. Has your social media presence increased as a result of being an imminently published author?
Yeah, I've been on Twitter for a long time, but it was very defunct. I left that account laying there for a really long time. But you kind of have to be on them, really. I'm not sure where readers are, so I think you kind of have to be all over them, really. I'm on Instagram. I like Instagram. You get to post pretty pictures and people tick like, and that's quite sweet and pleasant, and nobody yells at each other on Instagram. Twitter is a strange beast. I try and stay away from it whenever there's an election on or something like that, because it's usually shouty people, but it's all good fun. And Facebook, I think, is where I'm most present. I'm most present on my Facebook page, I think. But I do chat a bit on Twitter, mainly about fun things like what's on telly at the moment and that kind of thing.
Just like the rest of us, really.
Yeah.
Trying to avoid the shouty people.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we're running out of time now. So in the last minute or so, just tell our listeners where they can find out a little bit more about yourself and your book and when it will hit the bookshelves.
Sure. So it hits The Forgotten Village hits shelves on April 4th. So I think that was 2 weeks today. And it's on ebook and audio and paperback in most places. And my website is lornacooksauthor.com. And I think I'm on the same. I'm Lorna Cook Author on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. So it should be quite easy to find.
You should indeed. Absolutely wonderful. So you've got another book coming out this time next year. So hopefully you'll come back on the show and tell us all about that.
Oh, I'd love to. Thank you.
It's been fantastic talking to you. Enjoy your launch in 2 weeks' time. Get plenty of champagne and chocolates, I think, seems to be the accepted wisdom for that.
That's good. That sounds like a deal.
And we're now going to play out with the Stranglers and Duchess.
Expat Digital Radio, online 24/7.
You've been listening to the Arts Show podcast with Mike Madden. Come back soon for more artists, authors, musicians and anyone else connected with the arts. We're going to play out with Mike Sanchez and I Don't Stand a Chance.
Baby, you hiding something that you don't want me to know, because I'm getting a vibe from way down the side, like you're just about ready to go. And you can't tell me where you stayed last night, you just can't cope with treating me right. I'm on the road to heartbreak, now's the time to tell me so, because I'm getting a chill like I'm gonna be ill. I know you don't want me no more. I won't be satisfied with your little white lies. Girl, I've only just begun to realize I don't stand a chance. I don't stand a chance. You don't wanna know and I can't make you dance. Well, I said goodbye. Find yourself another guy. I wish you were mine, but I'm losing my mind. I don't stand a chance. This man, on the road to heartbreak. Now's the time to tell me so, because I'm getting a chill like I'm gonna be ill. I know you don't want me no more. I won't be satisfied with your little white lies. Girl, I've only just begun to realize I don't stand a chance. No, I don't stand a chance. You don't wanna know and I can't make you dance. Well, I'll say goodbye. Find yourself another guy. I wish you were mine, but I'm losing my mind. I don't stand a chance. I don't stand a chance.